Welcome back, everybody. My name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and in this series, we are rebuilding user interfaces in SwiftUI. So previously, we have covered rebuilding Spotify, and then we rebuilt Bumble, and now we're going to rebuild Netflix. The Netflix user interface is awesome. We're not going to build every single feature that they have. We don't have time for that, but the home screen and maybe one or two other screens we're going to take a look at. One thing I love about the Netflix UI, and the reason that I picked this to cover next, is because there's a lot of micro animations in their UI. So it's really easy to build like a simple screen, but then to polish it with micro animations, it adds just another touch that I think a lot of apps are missing. So Netflix has a lot of these micro animations, probably because they have a lot of resources. They probably have a pretty big team. But as I'm going to show you guys, in SwiftUI, we can actually reproduce a lot of these micro animations with just a couple of minutes, a couple lines of code. So that's what we're going to focus on as we rebuild Netflix, really getting these animations pixel perfect. Without further ado, let's jump into Xcode and write some code.
And we are back. What is up, everybody? We have done so much in this series so far. We built out Bumble and we built out Spotify. And just to quickly show you guys a quick recap of the stuff that we have done. So far, we have built Spotify, which looks really cool. We have a sticky pinned header at the top. We can click on the categories. We can click on the product and open up the product details page. We have a stretchy header and we have a cool custom navigation bar that comes in on the top. It's really cool. We can keep going and open up more screens as well. We have also looked at Bumble, and Bumble has swipe features. We have really cool user profiles that we built out. We built a custom filter bar here. We even built out the chat screen in Bumble where we have all these chats with some customization for whether or not users have new chats or it's their move. A lot of real world use cases there. And in this video, we're going to start building out Netflix. And so here is kind of what we are going to build. Netflix home screen, more or less. We have a header at the top. For Terry is the name of the user right now. We have this really cool filter bar, which we're going to add some animations to. So if we click it, we get the X to pop in here and we get this to be in a highlighted state. We can also X out. So really nice micro animations in this one. And that's one of the reasons that I chose Netflix to build next, is there's a lot of micro animations that really make this a basic screen look professional. And like you can just see how nice this looks and feels. There's a little bounce on the animation. It feels really nice. We also have this scroll view here. We have a hero cell in the center. But if you scroll up, you can see that the categories start to animate off the screen. And eventually the nav bar actually changes and turns into a fade, which is really nice. It's a really nice feature, nice animation. And we even have the background color starting to change a little bit. You can see here now it's fully black. If I come back up here, it is red. And if I start scrolling a little bit, it kind of moves with the scroll and then it disappears, which is a really cool touch. If we scroll down, we have these horizontal scroll views with a bunch of products on it. And then we even have a top 10. So obviously not Netflix's exact top 10, but pretty cool UI that we're going to build. Some of these cells have recently added. That's a random Boolean we're going to add, but it's a nice touch as well. And if you click on one of these, it opens up a sheet with, we're not going to build out a movie player, but we're going to put an image up here. And this is a nice sheet. And so this part scrolls. The top part does not. The top part just dismisses. It's a nice sheet though. And then we're going to have some micro animations. So for example, my list, if you click the plus, it's a really cool animation. We're going to build on that. The rate has a nice little popover that we're going to build. And then the share sheet, we're going to look at how to use basic share sheet in SwiftUI. And then there's just another scroll view down here. This screen is not super pretty, but we're going to focus a lot on like the micro animations and just wrapping it all together. So that's what we're going to build now. Netflix is obviously a majorly popular app. The actual code in the Netflix app, I'm sure, is much more complex than what we're going to build. But for just a couple hours of work, we're going to get pretty close. And I think it looks pretty damn cool. Without further ado, let's get coding. And we're going to start with the header up here and then the categories here in this video. Before we begin though, let's actually get the color scheme connected. I'm going to jump into Xcode and I'm going to open up the assets folder. And just like we did with the Bumble colors and the Spotify colors, we're going to create a new folder And I'm going to call it, you can probably guess it, Netflix colors. I'm going to copy Spotify black and just move it into Netflix colors. Firstly, we're going to have Netflix black. And again, I don't think these are the exact colors that Netflix uses, but I just did a quick Google search and it's what I came up with. So we're going to click on this. The black we're going to use is actually pitch black. So 000000. We're going to go with the next one will be Netflix dark gray. Dark gray will have a hex of 3E3737. Let's copy that one. We're going to do another one that's going to be Netflix dark red. Let's click on this one. Dark red will have a hex of 831010. Almost done. We're going to do Netflix light gray. And that will have a B3, B3, B3. Of course, we need the regular red, so Netflix red. And I think this color is actually correct. This is going to be DB0000. And last but not least, we need a white. So we're going to have Netflix white. And Netflix white will be pure white, which is just FFFFFF. Got our colors. Let's jump in. So our code so far, we have a Spotify folder, a Bumble folder. Let's right click, create a new group and have a Netflix folder. Within there, we're going to have a folder called core and a folder called components. Inside the core, we're going to right click, create a new file, a SwiftUI view, and let's call this Netflix home view. Click create, jump inside. Let's get our canvas going. Cool. Let's start out with a quick Z stack here. In the background, we're going to do color.netflix black. Ignore the safe area as always. We're going to worry about the animations and the background color here in a second. We're just going to keep it pitch black for now. And let's do the header. So let's put a V stack on the screen here, maybe spacing of 0. Open the brackets. I'm going to add a header here with an H stack. So again, do spacing of 0. Let's add text, and this is going to be like the for you. So for you, we'll just say for now. Let's give that a frame with a max width of infinity. Align it to the left edge. Let's give that a font of title. I guess while we're here, let's give this a foreground style of .netflix white, just so that we can start to see some of this stuff. Let's add in an H stack with some spacing of 16, and we're going to add here an image. This will be the Wi-Fi or the AirPlay icon. I'm just going to use tv.badge.wifi. It's slightly different than what Netflix actually has in their app, but it is close enough. We're going to have another one here with an image. This will be a system name of magnifying glass. Let's give both of these a font of title 2, so they're a good size. And on these, we're going to add an on tap gesture, which we have not done yet. So I will just leave them as a tap gesture for now. This is the actual header, but we're going to add a lot of logic to like support this whole custom header thing here. So I want to keep this nice and organized. So for right now, let's create a private var and call this the header of type some view. Let's cut our H stack, put the header on the screen, paste in the header down here. I'll put a spacer just to push it up to the top so we can see what it looks like. And then on the header, we'll just add a little bit of padding, maybe horizontal of 16. Beautiful. Simple so far. We're going to build one more thing in this video, and it is these categories. So a lot of work that we need to do here to deal with this animation and the selected state of these cells. So firstly, let's do these cells. Let's create a selected state for these first. Let's jump into our components section, right click new file. It'll be a SwiftUI view, and let's call this the Netflix filter cell. And we'll click create here. Netflix filter view, filter cell. I don't care what you want to call it. And let's write some code. So we know this cell is going to have text, and whether or not there's a little arrow here, like a little drop down arrow, we'll make a Boolean for that. And whether or not it is actually selected, we'll make a Boolean for that so that we can animate the background there as well. All right. Let's come up here. Let's create a variable called title, type string, set it equal to categories for now. Variable is dropdown of type bool, set it equal to true. Variable is selected of type bool, set it equal to false. Let's create a quick H stack here. Spacing of 4, open the brackets. First, we're going to add the title on the left. So we'll add the title. And then we'll say if is dropdown, let's put on the image with the system name of the chevron dot down. So if it's a dropdown, we're going to add this little icon here. And just the categories is a dropdown, but we're just going to play around with this Boolean. H stack, padding. Let's go horizontal of 16 because we love increments of 8. We also want to do vertical of maybe 8, and then let's give this a background. Start with color.blue just so that we can see what we are working with. I'm going to give this whole thing a .foreground style. Let's go Netflix light gray. Then I want to animate the background here. And so we're going to create a Z stack actually. Firstly, we're going to add a capsule. Let's do a capsule. Style will be circular. So capsule is basically like a rounded rectangle, except it's fully round. So you can't customize the corner radius. Let's give this a fill. Let's fill it with .Netflix dark gray. And so this will be the selected state. It'll be like this. I'll have the dark gray. And then if it is not selected, we're just going to have an outline. So we're going to have the same capsule, except we're going to give this a stroke with a line width of 1. So this will be our unselected state. And normally it's going to be on a black background. So let's make this a Z stack. Let's go color.black, ignore safe area, move V stack down here, and let's paste a couple of these in. All right, so we have an unselected state here. And then if it is selected, so we'll do an is selected, make this one true. And this one we're going to do is drop down false. All right, so then if is selected, we're going to put this capsule on the background as well. And I think that is it for now for this. I think we're going to come back and actually tweak this in a little bit. But I don't want to tweak it now because I want to explain to you guys why I am tweaking it later. So we'll leave this as is for now. We got our Netflix filter cell, and now we're going to create this next component here with the categories. It's a scroll view, and if you click on one, it selects it, and the little X button pops in here. And we're going to make that its own reusable component because we're going to add a lot of logic for this animation. I want to get it right, and I don't want to overcomplicate my home view. So let's right-click the components, create a new file, SwiftUI view, and let's call this the Netflix filter bar view. Might be like the category, Netflix filter bar view. Yeah, I guess that's fine. First, we know this is going to be a big horizontal scroll view. So let's add in here a scroll view. Let's go horizontal. Let's set the scroll indicators to .hidden. And then let's add an H stack in here. And so what we're going to say is if this is selected, we're going to add the X on the left side of the H stack here. So we need some logic for if is selected. And then there would be a image with a system name that is an X mark. Let's give this some padding of 8. And then I'm going to give this a background. Background will be a circle. And we're going to give it a stroke of line width of 1. Cool. I want to make this the same gray that we made ourselves. So let's make this a foreground style of .Netflix light gray. While we're at it, let's put our preview in a Z stack with the color.black and put this as an overlay. Great. I can see here, and you guys can barely see it, there's a little at the very top and the bottom. It looks like it's cut off a little bit there. I don't know if you guys can see it on your screen. It's very, very subtle. But the reason that is because the stroke actually is on the line of the perimeter of the circle. And so half of it is actually inside the circle and half of it is outside the circle. If I make it 10, you'll see it a little bit better. It gets cut off there. What we want to do is actually add a little bit of padding vertically here, just so that we can support that offset. So we're going to go vertical 4. On this circle, I'm going to add a background of color.blue so we can see what we're working with. And then I'm going to add an on tap gesture. And this will be on if we click the X mark. So up here, pass in a function called onXMarkPressed. It'll be a function that returns nothing or void. We will wrap it in parentheses to make it optional and set it equal to nil. This will be onXMarkPressed, question mark, and we'll call it. I don't want this to be blue, so let's go black, opacity 001. And we're actually starting to build out our component. On the right of this, in the H stack, we're going to do a for each. And let's go 0 to less than 10 for now. For each item in, and let's put on the screen a Netflix filter cell. Let's just keep it simple. All right, starting to look good already. It scrolls horizontally. Firstly, let's get the data for these cells. So I'm going to hold the option button, click enter here, put these on separate lines. And our first problem is that we actually don't have the data for these filters. So each filter needs a title and a value for whether or not it is a dropdown. The isSelected state, I'm going to keep separate from the data for the title, because this is going to be based on the view, not based on the underlying data model. So we're going to keep those two things separate. For now, let's create a quick data model for the filters. So up here, I'm going to create a struct and just call it a filter model. Let's open the brackets. Let's give it a title of type string, and we can make these constants actually, as well as a isDropdown of type bool. And string and bool are both hashable, but we don't have an ID in here, so let's just make this hashable. While we're at it, let's make it equatable so that we can set them equal to each other. When we create Netflix filter bar view, we are going to pass in the filters, which is an array of the filter model. Let's give it a starting array here. Let's do a static variable called mock array. That'll be an array of filter model. I'm just going to open the brackets, and then in here, let's make an array. Let's do a filter model, and I'm just going to do the ones that I have in this preview here, which is TV shows, false. Copy. The second one's going to say movies. This one will say categories, and we'll go true. So we'll set the array by default to the filter model.mockArray for now. Let's get these on the screen. So we're going to loop on them. They're hashable, so we'll pass the hash value each filter in. This will be the filter.title. The filter.isDropdown is selected. Let's just set for false for now. Looks like these are working. Next, I want to add a little bit of logic for when I actually click on one of these that we can select it. So for right now, let's create an @state private var. We'll call this selected filter of type filter model. I'll make it optional, set it equal to nil to start. And then we're going to say is selected is if the selected filter is equal to the filter that we are looping on. And then on each of these, let's give this a background here, color dot. So these, as we know, are like transparent, right? So I want to add an extra background here before I add a tap gesture. So where this blue is, we're going to go black, opacity 001. On tap gesture, we're going to set the selected filter equal to the filter we are looping. Let's try it here. Looks like it's working. Awesome. We only want to show the X mark if something is selected. So here, let's add some logic that says, if selected filter is not equal to nil, draw this onto the screen. Click, and it shows. Awesome. When we click on the X mark, we're going to pass in a function, but for right now, let's just set the selected filter equal to nil. So click, click, looks like it's working, but it's not animating. So we should add a little bit of animation here. On the whole scroll view, I'm going to add a animation modifier. Let's go bouncy because that one is fun and bouncy. Let's animate on change of selected filter. And this is starting to look better already. One thing I'm noticing here is if you look really closely, the background is kind of funky when it animates onto the TV shows here, right? You can see that it kind of pops in from the side. And that's because the Netflix filter cell, when we look at that logic, this is being drawn on at that time. So this capsule is transitioning onto the screen while that animation is happening. And it's giving us that kind of funky animation. So a better way to write this is actually to always draw it on the screen. And we're just going to animate the opacity. So we'll say if it is selected, will show it, otherwise hide it. Now it's not going to animate with the transition, but just animate already on the screen, and we're going to change the opacity. So now if I go back, I should be able to get a much nicer little animation when I click on these. I think that looks good. I'm also noticing the X kind of just pops in, right? And I want the X to actually transition in from the left side of the screen. I like that it's all the way towards the left edge, and I want it to transition in. So let's add here a quick dot transition. Let's go any transition dot move on the leading edge. And I think that looks better already. When we implement this in our app, we're going to want to add some padding around it. And normally in the call site, I would add some padding here of like padding of maybe, let's say, leading of 16. The problem if I put padding outside of this view is that if I add a background to this, the transition is actually not going to go to the edge of the screen. We can see here the edge of the screen's over here, and now we have this padding outside, right? So really I want the padding to be inside this component, and then I'll manually deal with it. So what I'm going to do is actually take the padding and put it inside the X bar here. So now I can go all the way to the edge of the screen, and it looks a little bit better. I want to align this up so when this is clicked on, the padding between the left side of the X mark is 16 pixels from the left edge, right? That's what this is right here. But if this is not selected, the TV shows all the way to the edge of the device. And I actually want that to also be aligned with my padding about 16 pixels in. So what I'm going to do is add padding on these cells as well. And I will say dot padding here. We'll go leading. And we'll say here, let's say if selected filter is equal to nil. So if it's not selected, let's give it 16, otherwise 0. Cool, but now it's added to all of the cells, and I only want to do it on the first cell. So if selected filter is equal to nil, let's do and filter is equal to the filters.first. So if it's the first one only, we'll put that 16 pixels. So now we keep this 16 pixels remaining throughout the animation here, which looks better. The last thing we want to do is when we select one, we want to hide the rest of them. We're going to draw these on the screen if we need to. So we're going to say if the selected filter is equal to nil, so if nothing is selected, or if the selected filter is equal to the filter we are looping on. So in either of those cases, we will draw this on the screen. Click, and it looks like we have a really cool little animation here. I really like the way that this came out. Let's get rid of our red on the preview. And let's wrap this up by just making it a little bit more reusable. So obviously we're doing all of this internally right now. We're going to select this filter inside this view. And we very well could do that and keep this state here. But I actually want to move the state outside of this view to the home view. So the home view and the home view model can manage this state more easily. So what we're going to do is actually just pass in the value of selected filter. So we'll make this a variable called filter model. We'll set it equal to nil to start. We're going to pass an action for on X mark pressed. We're also going to pass an action for on filter pressed. Filter press will be a function that returns void. Let's wrap it, make it optional, set it equal to nil. The difference here is when we click on a filter, so let's put the X mark pressed on the screen. We don't need this. But when we click on a filter, we actually want to call on filter pressed and pass in the filter that we're clicking on. So let's make sure that this here, we're going to pass back a filter model. I can delete this as well. I'm going to create a preview for this just so that we can make sure that it works in this file in the future. To create a file private struct called Netflix filter bar view preview. Make it a view and open up the brackets. Every view needs a body. And we're going to add in here a simple Netflix filter bar view. Hold the option button, click enter, triple click, Control M, and let's get our filters here. So we're going to say at state private var filters equals, let's go filter model dot mock array. The selected filter we'll do at state private var selected filter of type filter model, optional equal to nil. Selected filter we will pass in. On filter pressed, this will be for the new filter in, and this will be on the X mark pressed. So if they click a new filter, let's set the selected filter equal to new filter. And if they click the X mark press, we'll set selected filter equal to fill. Make sure it works. Let's put our preview on the screen here. And beautiful. And you're probably wondering, why am I doing this rather than the way we did it in the last video? So in this video, we are passing all of the data into this view, and there's no state held by this component. But we've created other components in this course where we've held the state in the child views. So the reason is, for example, I did a binding we did the Bumble filter view. And when we clicked on these filters, it was binding to the home screen. These are just two different ways of doing the same thing, but there are nuances here. So when I click this binding, right, the value on the home view, so the Bumble home view, where we actually have the state, is immediately getting updated. When I click on this, it is binding to the state of the home filter, and it's immediately getting updated. And sometimes that is the case, and that's what you want. That's how a lot of UI components are built. But for this example, you could imagine a situation where maybe we click the button, and then we want to do some other logic before we actually update the UI. So with the binding example, it's immediately going to update the UI. There is no option to do anything else. But if we set it up this way, we were not binding directly. Instead, we're going to pass in a value and pass back an action. Now I have the option of doing something else in my code if I need to. So for example, I can add here maybe a delay, try await task.sleep. Let's go for maybe 1 second. And then I'll set the selected filter. So now I can click, wait a second, and it'll work. This is obviously not what I want to do in my app, but you could imagine you're building some component where there's an asynchronous call and you want to do something before you actually update it. So for example, if a user hits a like button, sometimes you want to update it on the device immediately, but some companies might want to confirm that it actually did like and it did save before updating the UI. There's just two different ways to build these components. You can use the @binding, it's very SwiftUI-esque, or you can pass in these actions like we're going to do here. So for Bumble, we did the bindings. For Netflix, we're passing in the actions. Let's wrap up this video. I'm putting this on the screen. I'm going to go back to the Netflix home view, and below the header, let's actually just copy these same filters and go back to our Netflix home view. And I'm just going to very quickly, I'm even going to copy this entire code here. Literally the preview, we're just going to put on the screen right here. I think we should maybe add a little bit of padding. Let's go padding of top 16. It's exactly what we wanted. It is working. We have the selected state when we click on it. We have the cool transition animating from the left side of the device. And we are rocking and rolling. That's all for this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. We looked at transitions and animations, creating custom components. We built this one to be super reusable. There literally is no state in this component, and yet it's got this awesome animation. These micro animations go a long way in building a beautiful application. Thank you all for watching. As always, my name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.